What's going on, Hot Take of the Day listeners? DRW here. Before we start the show, I want to start with a thank you to one of the friends of the show and take a quick minute to introduce API Control Systems, who specializes in control panel fabrication, skid packaged automation, and instrumentation and electrical installations for the oil and gas industry as well as other industries. During a recent show with well-known CEO, he said that when companies try to do too many things, it's very rare that they're successful. And in the words of Mr. Chris Wright, if you're going to be really good at something, you better be deeply focused on it. Well, for over 3 decades, API has been focused on building control panels such as PLC panels for compressor stations, hydraulic well control systems, drilling choke consoles, and skid packaged automation such as hydraulic power and chemical injection skids for deep water projects, and safely installing them. As you know, my sign off, be safe, be good. Safety is always first. Whether electronic, hydraulic, pneumatic, they have the expertise and enthusiasm with their hardworking team. API has a great culture and a lot of longtime employees. They're responsive and they partner with a wide variety of companies from the super majors down to local municipalities. Last year, 2 longtime employees acquired the company, having started there at entry-level positions over 20 years ago, which is a cool example of patience, perseverance, and the American dream. If you want to learn more about API, please go to apicontrolsystems.com and consider giving this fun team a shot at your next panel fabrication or I&E installation project. They're based in Louisiana, they're ready to travel, and again, their website is apicontrolsystems.com. Contact information is there, and when you ask for them, ask for Lucas Como and tell him you want the Hot Take of the Day DRW discount. Thanks for listening. Now on with our show. What is going on, Hot Take Nation? It is DRW here, coming to you from Arizona pre-Thanksgiving. This should be released right about Thanksgiving, so you can be listening to it while you're having your socially distanced food and turkey fest, where there will be no singing in California, there can be no more gatherings more than 10 in New York, and the police might come and just break up the festivities. But this week, we have Harris Kupperman back on the pod. I was thinking the last time you were on was May-ish. So I wanted to start with 2 ideas you had for stocks. More thematic, because you're very much a event-driven investor. And one of the concepts you talked at the time was tankers. Tankers and LPG in particular. So I'm curious, now 5 months in, how that theme has changed, and then how you think about investing as things change, both for good and for bad.
Sure, yeah, I'm happy to come on and do an update here. And yeah, don't get arrested over Thanksgiving. It's not worth it. No, in terms of tankers, I have an overriding thesis that there's less new construction coming. The global fleet keeps aging, and there's going to be some scrapping as environmental regulations kick in. And nothing's changed in my thesis. What's been hurting my tanker stocks really is the fact that crude oil demand globally is down and demand for transport oil is down. If you look where the big drops in supply have come, they haven't really, the U.S. is down a few million barrels, but it's really OPEC that cut a lot. And OPEC supply tends to go on the ocean. So it's hurt my tanker stocks. And it's something you have to live through. In the end, they still, even though Q4 won't be that great, they still have the best year they've had in over a decade. And I'm all about taking sectors that have had a bad run for a very long time, and they're at an inflection. We're inflecting, and as soon as this COVID nonsense is over, I think we're going to inflect a lot higher. I would say that Dorian, which is one of my largest positions, they're transporting liquefied propane. They're doing quite well, actually, because Asian propane demand is sky high. OPEC is restricting supply, and it's all coming from Gulf of Mexico, which is a really long haul. And you're doing this at a time when demand's up a lot. There's a huge arbitrage right now, just between pricing in Gulf of Mexico and Asia. And then finally, propane is being used instead of naphtha because oil pricing is up. So you have a lot of things that are really driving the propane side.
Well, and you've certainly seen LPG in the last, I mean, it's been a little bit bumpy, but I think relative to May, it's sitting at highs almost at $10 a share as we record this. So it is good. It is good when you have a thesis. The other one you talked about was home builders.
Oh, it's on fire.
So talk about, has that changed at all? And with 5 more months of data to see the trends and evolution of housing and building and suburbs and flight from cities or not, what are you seeing now as you think about home builders and lumber and everything?
Well, I mean, the demand is just white hot. Nothing's really changed. We still have the same fundamental backdrop of people leaving cities, people going to low tax states. I don't think anything's changed. You also have a demographic boom that people my age are now having kids and they don't want to live in a 800 square foot studio. So you have a lot of things driving it. I mean, every home builder reported record numbers. I mean, the thing that held them back actually is inventory. It takes a while to build a home. So on the revenue side, I think some of them missed a little. I think expectations maybe got a little too high and they sold off a little. But if you look at the forward and you look at the backlog of new demand and forward bookings and all this other stuff, it's just white hot. And that's all going to bleed over into the guys producing the supplies for a home builder. Home building itself is a pretty terrible industry. It's just a terrible business, capital intensive. It's awful. You want to own the guys that are making the bits and parts. You want to own the guys that are doing siding and windows and doors and plumbing and pipe fitting and all these other things, roofing and those guys are just going to make a fortune, and that's where I'm putting my money. And finally, I think we talked about it last time, but there's a company called St. Joe. They're one of the largest owners of property in the state of Florida, mainly in the Florida Panhandle, and the Panhandle is actually booming, and they're booming. And they're not actually building the homes; they're just selling the lots, which is the highest margin thing you can do in housing. You're taking raw land and you're basically getting some permits and putting in sewer. And they're just making a fortune. That's actually my biggest position, and it's up more than 50% since I put it on this spring.
Yeah, I was going to say, and so for those listeners who don't follow you at Adventures in Capitalism, you do share these ideas, and again, we don't make investment advice on the show, but it is always good to follow investment professionals who are making their living doing these kinds of theme event-driven events, and Joe has been certainly one of your better ones. LPG has really come back.
LPG is at 6-month highs now. It's good.
Yeah,
it's really good.
So the other one that we talked about before we pivot to sort of your view of the world today, Bitcoin. Now, there's many people who don't understand Bitcoin, including me. I mean, and I understand it in terms of there's a limit and there's mining and there's 21 million total and 18 million outs, and they're very computer intensive to go get them. And in a world where some may believe the U.S. dollar, Citigroup this week came out and said they think the U.S. dollar against a basket of currencies is going to drop 20%, which somehow I don't know how that's going to happen. So hopefully you can explain how our currency is going to be worse than the basket of other people's currencies. But Bitcoin is on an absolute tear. I think it was 2017 the last time it was around 17,000 a coin. And I believe it hit 18,000 a coin this week. And you are a cheerleader and believe in the Bitcoin story. Tell me about Bitcoin.
So I'm not going to say I believe in the Bitcoin story. I think it's fundamentally worthless. It's totally pointless and it's retarded. That doesn't mean it's not going higher, In the end, it follows Ponzi scheme economics and Ponzi scheme logic. And as long as more money is going into the Ponzi scheme than coming out, the scheme will keep inflating. Bitcoin is this weird thing in that most of the float is owned by a couple dozen whales, or it's owned by guys that forgot how to get into their wallets. There's really only about 6 or 8 million coins, depending on how you count it all. And there's this entity called Grayscale Bitcoin Trust. It actually publicly trades, and I have some shares. The ticker is GBTC, and it's been buying up coins. Every day it does a continuous offering that you can put capital in, and it will buy more coins. And what it's doing is it's cornering the market in Bitcoin. And as we've seen many times when other entities have cornered the market, once you restrict the float beyond a certain threshold, small incremental buying sends it dramatically higher. And that's what we're seeing now. where small little bits of incremental buying are really pushing the price higher. There's some Canadian entity this week that raised another 75 million. I call it the QSIPs. There's about 20 of these entities. Every country has one or two, and they're all, offering shares to the public and then buying more Bitcoin. And it's just basically putting the Bitcoin inside these entities. I don't think this is what it was really meant for originally, but what it's doing is it's restricting the price. The supply, and it's pushing the price up. And I see nothing that ends this trend. If anything, I think we're at the acceleration point.
So this is where I struggle, and we're going to pivot to your overarching thesis on Project Zimbabwe here in a second. But so you're fundamentally saying, I don't get this. Well, I get it, but we're cornering the market. We're artificially driving up price for something that's fundamentally worthless, and yet it's like limitless. Where is the limit? There's no limit.
There is no limit. This will be the world's biggest Ponzi scheme. There will never be another bigger Ponzi scheme. This will be a Ponzi scheme that breaks the entire financial system. I think we're in the early stages of this still, and that doesn't mean Bitcoin can't drop 75% tomorrow, and they'll just keep buying the coins. Bitcoin's very volatile, and you have to keep that in mind if you intend to own it. But I just think they're going to eventually hoover up all the coins, and then small little bits of buying will send it to outer space, and that's what we've seen happen on a smaller scale. And I think it's about to accelerate.
Wow. Okay, so for those listeners who don't know your macro theme, Project Zimbabwe, I want to go back. I want to go back to the young Cuppy that was overseas in Zimbabwe watching the stock market go up at a time when there was like no electricity, no running water, and the main street was a disaster. Some might say very much like America today, where people don't have jobs, people can't pay bills, people are going to get evicted. And nonetheless, the stock market's hitting all-time highs. So give us an intro to Project Zimbabwe and then tie it to where you think we sit in the world of valuation and Zimbabwe hyperinflation in the United States.
So when you print money and it eventually ends up in the stock market, it pushes the stock market higher. We've seen this in lots of screwed up countries over time. Zimbabwe is one of many that have done roughly the same thing. And, I was in Zimbabwe is about 10 years ago or so. And I remember they were printing money like madmen. And they really had no food on the shelves. They had no running water, the electricity cut in, it cut out. I was actually there the day the national airline went bankrupt. And myself and 4 other hedge fund managers we all had to hitchhike our way out of the country. I was actually supposed to meet my wife, or girlfriend at the time, at Victoria Falls. And we all just hitchhiked our way 12 hours, whatever it was, to the border with Zambia. There's no other way out. They didn't really have diesel even for the cars. It was quite hard actually to hitchhike our way because the first car we were in actually caught fire. But the interesting thing is I went to the stock market while all this chaos was going on. And the stock market tripled that day. The stock market actually lost power while tripling. And it just shows you that if you print enough money and the money has to go find a home somewhere, it's going to eventually go into stocks and crazy things can happen. I don't think we're going to be quite Zimbabwe here in America, though we seem to run our elections similarly. But I think we'll do Zimbabwe light, and I don't think you can be short this market. I think you have 2 exposures, which is long and very long. I've taken my exposure down quite a lot. I almost feel like I'm taking on risk by being about 20% cash, just because there's a lot of election volatility still to come, and I just want to have some room in case I need to add on something crazy. But as soon as we finally choose a president, I intend to be full max long again, because this thing's going to go parabolic.
So help me understand how this is good. So if we take Zimbabwe, well, I know it's not good, but so you take Zimbabwe and you say, well, it's got a messed up government with messed up elections, which ironically so does the U.S. And if you say there's a big gap between the rich and the poor, okay, well, so does the U.S. But everyone knows that this feels very much to me like 2008, 6, 7, 8, when all the mortgage brokers knew that no income verification, no jobs, like giving houses to people, refinancing at rates. Like everyone knew how it was going to end. The only question was, what was the catalyst to cause it to end? And so how do you, as someone who is a value guy, looks at everything's going parabolic, you can't be in cash, you're going to get crushed if you're short, but at some point this has to end, no?
It ends when they take away the printing press from the Fed. At some point, it ended in Zimbabwe because they literally were starving and they had to dollarize the economy, and the stock market stopped going up. It collapsed. The few remaining businesses all went insolvent, and they had a reboot. It stopped when they take the printing press away. And, if you hear Powell talking, I mean, he's talking about going faster. And you hear all the other central bank governors, they're talking about going faster. You hear, Congress, and they're talking about, spending more. We're in the acceleration phase. We're not in the taking it away phase. Eventually what you're going to see happening is that inflation's going to pick up and you're going to see businesses start struggling. An inflationary environment usually isn't good for most businesses. But we're not at that phase yet. We're still at that, everyone's enjoying inflation phase. Everyone's enjoying money printing phase. And, I think everyone knows that money printing is bad, but we're in a governmental system right now, very much like Zimbabwe, where no one wants to lose their elections. In the end, they printed money because it kept Mugabe in power. We're printing money here to keep the vast majority of congressmen and senators in power. We could have had a small reset when long-term capital failed. We could have had a reset when the tech bubble failed in 2000. We could have had a reset in 2002 after 9/11. We could have reset in 2008. Every one of these times would have been an incrementally more painful reset, but they kicked the can. And now, a proper reset would probably lead to a revolution or something because the entire system would die. So they're just going to kick the can and print because all these guys want to stay reelected. It's a really terrible turn of events, but honestly. But, I'm not a politician. I'm just a guy trading as a hedge fund. So I'm going to do what I know how to do because I'm a history major in the end. And I know that you want to be long inflationary assets. And, we're going to be long those. And, in the early stages of money printing, Ponzi schemes and frauds and tech SaaS stocks, they're the ones that go up. But later in this cycle, you just see the things that are inflation protected going up the most. And, we own a lot of that.
So I was slightly encouraged this week, which will be next week by the time we release this, but Mnuchin came out and said that he was going to reappropriate about $500 billion of funds that hadn't been used as part of the CARES package early on. And it needs, at least initially, the market took it as this is scorched earth. Trump and Mnuchin are taking their toys and going home, and they don't, they recognize the bad of just continuing to print money, and the market immediately fell. And then Mnuchin came out and clarified that no, I just wanted to free this $500 billion up so it could be redeployed into Congress so we could have it spent on some sort of stimulus package, and the stimulus discussion in Washington continues anew. Where do you think is there anyone who's going to stand up and say, look, we know the fatality rates of COVID now. Shutting down the economy is not the right answer. Printing money is a Band-Aid at best. We need to reopen the economy, target very specific stimulus to the people who've been wickedly hurt, and do the best, which is very counter your point of, well, they just want to get reelected and keep the presses going. Is there any grown-ups that are going to say something smart in Washington to make this be less painful when it bursts at the end?
No, there really aren't. I mean, look at Zimbabwe. I think everyone knew that confiscating a bunch of farms and confiscating businesses was counterproductive, but it was popular at the time, so they did it. And they're going to do things that are popular. Locking people up for Thanksgiving, oddly, is popular in blue states, and the red states are just going to ignore the rule. So, it's funny, even in blue states, you have red counties where the sheriffs are like, no, we're not going to do this. We just don't think it's necessary. And everyone's just going to kind of go their own way. But, because of social media, you can't have a politician standing there and having old people die of the flu So the politicians have to pretend they're doing something, and the only thing they can do is tell you to stay home. But then they don't really enforce their own laws because everyone kind of knows it's counterproductive and stupid. And it just makes a bastardized situation out of government. And it makes the whole government not function, because if the local sheriff ignores one law, he's going to ignore the other laws. And every sheriff's going to make up their own rules. And you end up, you don't have a top-down system anymore, which, in many ways I kind of agree with, getting rid of a top-down system. But, there's certain things that work better with a top-down system.
So let's talk about the election. You kind of alluded to it a couple of times, and we've both made sort of snide jokes that we're looking a lot more like a banana republic at this point. I'm curious your take on all of it, and we've been bombarded for the last 2 weeks of the GOP and the president saying there was voter fraud, there was a whole bunch of different things. Then there hasn't been evidence. Then the media, including Fox, which has been Trump's biggest cheerleader, is sort of also now back on another. We've seen some of the weirdest things I've ever seen in the last 2 weeks, and I'm curious your take on fraud. Was there fraud? And what is going to come of this election, both this year, and how do we move forward from this?
Well, Trump clearly won the election. I think that's pretty clear. At 2 a.m., a couple of people got together and decided that Trump was going to win, and they were going to fraud it up. And nothing really happened for about an hour, and then the fraud started. I think that's about as clear as anything I've ever seen in my life. What's going to come of it? I don't really know. I wrote a blog post and a bunch of people got mad, so I'm going to stay out of politics. But, I've seen Trump my entire life. He was bankrupt for most of my childhood. It never seemed to impact him. He just kind of made him stronger. He could go away right now and step down gracefully, but I've never seen Trump do anything graceful. And I've really never seen him step down for anything either. I don't really know what's going to happen. But there's 70-odd million people that think that he won the election. Social media is trying to censor the facts, but facts have a way of getting themselves around. And you have about half the country that thinks Trump won, and they're kind of pissed. Some of them are more pissed than others. I don't know what's going to happen. I think the stock market just kind of shoving this off and ignoring it is absolutely delusional. And you can have, all the rich people get together in a room and decide to kind of just ignore this, and, they're going to run their television stations and pretend it didn't happen. But I think the vast majority of, voters who voted for Trump know the truth. And I don't know, there could be something absolutely crazy that happens between now and, the swearing in. I wouldn't count out Trump. I still think he's got about even money odds of winning this thing. And maybe I'm contrarian for thinking that, but, I don't think he wins this in a 25 vol environment. I think, Vic's is 100 if he wins it from here.
Oh, absolutely.
He might do something totally out of left field that no one's predicting, but a Trump win is a 100 vol event. And that's why every day I show up to work and sell more.
Well, so it's interesting that you say that and we're going to talk oil because it's an inflationary asset and we've seen some weird things there. I also think just on the political piece, for those who believe that there was cheating, and look, there's billions of dollars in politics, and I think both sides would cheat. And I listened to Scott Adams, who is the writer of Dilbert, and he
smart.
And he posed the question. He said, "So the left believes that Trump is Hitler, and so much so that if he won, we had boarded up all the cities that were democratically run." Because we expected, we expected the country to burn if Trump won. Now, Trump, in apparently losing, all the Republicans went and started doing their tax planning. But Adams sort of said, if you believe that Trump is Hitler and you could democratically vote him out, including cheating, is that enough motive to do it? And I think the definitive answer is yes. And I agree with you, and maybe people will forget. There's been some little clips on social media, but Trump was the money favorite at about 1 a.m. Eastern substantially because he was leading in a number of states. And the only state that was a shock that was called was Arizona, which had been called very early when the data didn't really look. and there was something like 100,000 votes. I don't know the details exactly, and I've never been able to find it because social media is suppressing it, as is the news. But there was something like 100,000 votes that just switched. And there was a time on television where in Pennsylvania, Trump lost 18,000 votes and Biden gained 18,000 votes within 45 seconds. Do you remember that?
It's all kind of crazy. Look, I don't want to get too deep into the mechanics of how it all worked because I don't think anyone really knows how it all worked. I think you can look at this from a statistical angle and just look at, the United States is really pretty homogeneous. There's some really red states, there's some really blue states, but the vast majority of the country, is 60-40, 55-45. It's pretty homogeneous of a place, excluding about 10 states. And so you can do just data analysis and look for outliers in all sorts of situations. You can do it by voting district, by county, by state. You just look for outliers. And there's some really odd anomalies all over the place in a handful of states where other really close states like my state in Florida didn't have these funny anomalies. Florida is a 49-51 state. It's been like that many elections. Our state didn't have weird anomalies, which is odd for a very close swing state. Whereas other close swing states had bizarre anomalies. I mean, you have a situation where it's some parts of Wisconsin, they had more votes than voters. Have you ever seen the movie Office Space?
Yes.
They tried to cheat a little and they were going to, round up instead of round down the pennies.
Yeah.
Like the Democrats did that, but they cheated too much. And you have 120% of the population vote in each county. It's just, okay. It's a little odd. But look, I don't want to go too deep into that because, it borders the conspiracy theory side. And, I'm more of, I look at the data, I analyze the data, I make an opinion, and then I'm just here to make money for my clients. So in the end, if there's not something actionable, there's not, a way to turn it into profits for my clients, it's all just kind of interesting, but you got to move on. And, I think we have about a 2-month window where something absolutely crazy may happen, or maybe it'll be totally benign. I don't really know.
Well, that's the one that was the reason I was kind of pushing on this, because to your point, if the VIX went to 100, I mean, we talked about a black swan event, which happened in the energy industry, sort of, COVID demand, lockdowns hit, Russia breaks, Saudi breaks, production goes up, and oil just went crazy for 2 months and hit negative numbers, as everybody knows. But how does the market, 3,600 on the S&P doesn't feel like it's appropriately pricing in any breath of bad coming out of this on the election. And I mean, this thing could just go right back to the beginning of March again.
This is a lot of different scenarios, and this is what makes it so hard. I mean, in the end, Trump wasn't really bad for the stock market. He was actually quite good for the stock market. The stock market may be shrugging and saying, okay, fine. For 40 years, they had 2 popes, and, Catholicism just marched on forward also. So fine, I don't know. There's a lot of scenarios. I don't think we're all going to take out our guns and start shooting each other. Well, I hope not. I don't think this is a civil war. I think, there might be some craziness, but maybe the market has it right, and it's just going to be totally fine. I don't know. Or you have a crazy, drawn-out constitutional crisis, and the whole system freezes up and there's no more stimulus and the market collapses. I mean, in the end, the market is looking forward to some stimulus right after they figure out who's in charge of this country. And if that stimulus gets postponed, the whole thing could fall apart. I don't really know. There's a lot of scenarios. I try to get rid of the really dramatic Civil War type stuff because I just think that's crazy. But I don't know what's going to happen. And, the great thing about a stock market is that there's times where you can make a lot of money by doing something. There's times where, there's not that much to do. And there's times where it's potentially very risky to do something. And cash is optionality. And everyone at the March lows was pissed that they didn't have enough cash to buy more stuff. I took a ton off in February when I started seeing this stuff, this COVID kicking around in China. So I had plenty of room to add, and I added a lot. I want to have cash because you never know when you have another great chance to add. And, if we don't have a crash on this presidential stuff, there'll be some other thing that drops and I'll add. There's always something to do. and the stock market's at all-time highs. I mean, why do you need to be invested in everything? It makes no sense. I mean, besides, I've had just a phenomenal year this year, so there's no reason to really press it too hard.
So let's talk, pardon me, let's talk oil for a second. And I would throw copper in there as an inflationary asset too, but oil. I'm curious to hear your view, because obviously OPEC has severely restrained supply. We have demand generally low, except for what we're seeing out of Asia, so which is generally recovery. We're seeing new rolling lockdowns. We see inventories at a relatively high level. And then we have this backdrop of a falling US dollar and inflation. How does one even begin to price oil in that context? And what do you think about oil in the next 6 to 12 months, let's say?
Well, you have to figure out first what's going to happen to lockdowns. I think they're absolutely asinine, and I think the vast majority of countries are the citizens are of the view it's insane, and that's why you're seeing citizen protests everywhere in Europe. The other countries are doing it. I just don't really know, but if you don't know, I mean, you have a reasonably good view of the supply number because there's pretty good data. Will OPEC cut? Will they not cut? I mean, it's kind of the margin. But we have a pretty good view of the supply side, but on the demand side, who the hell knows? And that makes it really hard to price the asset. And, it had oil dropped to $20, then it's easy to say, it's probably not going much lower, but it's not dropping. So there's no trade there for me. It's kind of how I think about it. Obviously, this destroys supply looking out a year or two, and that gets me much more bullish on energy producers. I think 2021 is the year of nat gas, and 22 is the year of oil. But I'm not really doing all that much. I don't feel like there's that much to do there versus other sectors that are more interesting. In the end, I want to buy the inflection. I don't want to buy the hope of the inflection.
Right. So what other than what we talked about last time, what other sectors are you finding interesting right now from your event-driven inflection point strategy?
Not that much, quite honestly. It's all at all-time highs. My portfolio, I got a whole lot of Bitcoin. I got a whole lot of St. Joe. Those two positions are more than half of my portfolio. I got a company that's making components for housing that I absolutely love, Cornerstone. I've written about that in my blog too, and it's up quite a lot. I own my Dorian and my TK. My TK is not really doing much of anything, but my Dorian is killing it. Outside of that, I'm just looking at my book right now. I just really don't have that much time, quite honestly. I've degrossed a lot. I've taken pretty much everything off. There's always going to be another cool thing to do. There's always something to do. And I don't see anything right now today. As I said, the great thing about this whole stock market game is that the vast majority of the time, there's really nothing to do. I mean, people go on TV and they talk about what they're doing because they're trying to raise money or, they're trying to sell you some product or, that's just part of their marketing function. But for people like me, a lot of times I just don't do all that much. I've done a lot of event-driven just because, there's a lot of, short-term, couple week, maybe a month sort of tactical things to do. The stock market's gotten really screwed up because of all the passive money. So you don't have that many humans, you have a lot of computers, and when you have some sort of a corporate event, the computers are forced to do something that's often against the best interests of the people who invest in these products. But that's just the way the computers are programmed. So you have these short-term anomalies that are very, very lucrative to capitalize on. And because they have a limited duration, it's kind of like an idea with a fuse. That after a certain number of days, whatever, either the trade works or it doesn't. You go on to the next one. And if you play a lot of them, the odds are very strongly in your favor. And I've been doing a lot more of that lately because I just don't have anything else that interests me. But I've even taken that off my books because, quite honestly, I'm really worried that something crazy happens on the election side. And I'd rather have cash right now. Though, the event-driven stuff is pretty good for a few $100 bips a month. And I go back to that in January if we have a president.
So last question for today, because we touched on it last time, and it's in timing wise. So Tesla was added to the S&P 500, and Tesla, as a result of that news, went up 20% over the course of about a 3-day period. which of course is interesting. And to your point of passive investing, there's so much passive money looking for ETFs that aren't making any choices. They just buy the index, which creates everyone in an index when it's market weighted becomes massively overvalued. Or I guess overvalued is a relative term, but there you see bizarre things where the business doesn't change and they go up 20%. I'm curious how you view that and the decision of the S&P, given that Tesla is sort of a deeply controversial company with a deeply controversial CEO.
Well, the S&P itself is very formulaic. They have a checklist, and if you check all the boxes, you get added to the club. And that's just the way the rules work. And they set the rule, and then it's hard to have, what is it, the 10th or 15th largest company in the United States that has complied with the rules. They may have frauded through a few of the rules, but they technically check the box, and S&P says, welcome to our club. They had to be added, I guess, at some point. In terms of the fact that it was up, was it almost $100 this week? I've told you, event-driven is phenomenal. That the day it got added, it opened up $60. It dropped $20, $30 from the open. I bought some. I can't believe I say I was long Tesla, but I was. I sold it already. It was very good to me. I played it about 1/4 the size I'd normally play a typical event-driven position. A typical event-driven position is already going to be quite small in that you expect no one position to move your P&L. But it was just such high probability that I had to play it, even though I'm in degrossing mode. I played it. I made some money. I moved on. It's gone higher, but the statistical data says that it was a very high probability trade, and that's what happens when you have massive fund flows. There's $50 or $60 billion worth of Tesla that needs to be bought, and there's just not that much for sale. The people who own it are either ETFs that own it and they don't even know they own it, or it's people who are on some sort of EV car jihad, and they will never sell it. So there's just not a lot of potential sellers, and there's some guy that needs to buy 60 billion of it. Of course it's going to go up.
So how does that end? And again, I know there's been shorts in it forever, and it continues to go up.
Why does it ever end? I don't really know. Why doesn't Tesla just keep going up, and then eventually they buy Volkswagen and General Motors and they have an actual business? He kind of won. I give him credit. Look, I bet against it for 2 years. I lost a little money. Thank God I stopped out in the high 200s. And that's before split. I give him credit. He bluffed his way and frauded his way through, and he's probably going to end up having something that's marginally sustainable now because he can raise unlimited amounts of money and buy a real company. Good for him.
That is what America's about. Well, Harris, it's always enjoyable to talk to you. I love your approach. I love the way your mind works. And I think in the context of everything going on, people should be following your newsletter at Adventures in Capitalism. And I think that it also should, for those day traders out there, it should sort of alarm you that this is the person on the other side of some of the trades that you're trying to beat. And so maybe it's time to leave it to the professionals and get a money manager.
Don't worry. I get plenty of these wrong, but I appreciate those sentiments.
Love it. Well, great to see you. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone, one and all. Enjoy your families. It's been a crazy year. Hopefully 2021 will be better. And until next time, be safe, be good. Have a great day. And bye.
Hey, thanks.